Hello everypony and welcome back. So I've actually been itching to make this video for a few weeks now. Ever since I started my channel last month, I've wanted to talk about a certain villain and her amazingly terrifying background. Queen Chrysalis is without a doubt the scariest villain in My Little Pony Generation 4. If I'm being genuinely honest with you guys, she and her changelings honestly feel like they shouldn't even belong to a happy-go-lucky franchise such as MLP. On the surface level, they don't really seem all that bad when we watch the show. Sure, she has her moments looking a bit scary and unnerving, but nothing comes close to how she looks and acts in the G4 comics. Now, we're not going to be looking at every single comic that she appears in today's video. I'm only going to be looking at the few first early issues, as I believe not only are they great lore dumps, but they're also where her horror vibes really shine. I feel like not many people have read the G4 comics, and so this will be a fun little video for you guys that haven't ever read any issues. Queen Chrysalis and her comic book shenanigans. We're going to begin by skipping over the first two issues that she appears in, and the reason why? Well, I'm not going to spend too much time on those two comics, because she doesn't really have too much of a big role aside from kidnapping the CMC and taking over Ponyville momentarily. So instead, we're going to jump straight into issue 3, because that's really where we start to see her for the terrifying monster that she is. Without further ado, saddle up every pony, because today, I'm going to show you why Queen Chrysalis is My Little Pony's most terrifying evil. Issue 3 starts off right after her defeat in Season 2, after the wedding of Princess Cadence and Shining Armor. The Battle of Canterlot is over, and the changelings have been utterly defeated. She and her remaining forces crash into a village quite far from Canterlot. This village is the home of sentient cat people. These cute loving cats immediately accept the new creatures that just landed in their town quickly, by making cakes, cards, and even some banners. Some write down notes and expressing their love, welcoming the changelings to their town. Little did they know, however, this would be their biggest mistake. One changeling notes that they are too weak to launch another attack on Canterlot, that they need to regain their strength, regroup, and replan. Chrysalis, ever the observant one, takes note of how loving these cat creatures are. Knowing that her changeling was right, that her and her forces are too weak to launch another attack, she orders her changelings to feed. The changelings attack the village. They ravage the town, capturing and sucking the love from the townspeople, leaving nothing but an empty husk behind. Given their peaceful lifestyle and smaller sizes, the cats are unfortunately unable to fight back. The entire town and its buildings are covered in this sick, disgusting green goo-like substance. What makes this whole attack worse, in my opinion, isn't just how brutal and how efficient the changelings are, but it's how quickly they're able to take over a territory and immediately start building a new hive. Later on, she threatens the CMC with violence, promising to show them just what exactly happened to the people who once lived here. The CMC begin taunting Chrysalis. They provoke her into lashing out. Chrysalis ends up grabbing a random cat villager, holding it up by the neck, showing the creature off to the CMC. As she holds up this cat, Apple Bloom looks on with a worried expression. Sweetie Belle looks pretty amazed. Scootaloo looks on with a worried expression much similar to Apple Bloom's. And it's Scootaloo who asks the question, what exactly she's doing with this cat. Scootaloo would have her question answered. Without hesitation, Chrysalis kills it. As we'll see in the next issue that we're moving into, Chrysalis is sadistic. For now, we can move on to the next issue. Issue 4. In issue 4, the main six finally arrive at the old cat village. Chrysalis, now happy the main six are here and ready to drain Twilight of her magic and feed the main six to her army of changelings, she decides she doesn't need the CMC anymore. The CMC question if that means she'll let him go, and she simply replies with a cold, straight answer. No. We can see her snarling and grinning sadistically, drooling and licking her lips at the prospect of doing God knows what to these poor fillies. This once again shows how sadistic she is. The fact she is willing and excited over hurting 3 young fillies shouldn't be ignored. But after she is defeated by Twilight Sparkle, the ponies lock her and her changelings away inside the castle. But in the rest of this issue and the next issue that we'll be looking at, these issues never show us those tiny cat people ever again. And given what we'll see in the next comic, I think it's safe to say Equestria has a few less cats in it now. So moving on from possible cat genocide, we can jump into the next issue we'll be looking at. My Little Pony, Fiend Ship is Magic issue 5. This comic is set a few years later. We know this because Twilight Sparkle is now Princess Twilight Sparkle, and the entire castle that we once saw in this cat village has now been transformed into a prison. The girls return to check up on the queen and ensure that her 1,000-year punishment is going to plan. But as soon as they get there, in typical Main 6 fashion, they get a little bit sidetracked and distracted. How distracted do they get? Well, they begin discussing and talking and sharing 2 old stories from pony history. Both of these stories just so happen to include Queen Chrysalis. The first story we get to see is the fall of Timbuktu. Timbuktu, an ancient Pegasus city high in the sky. Timbuktu is a beautiful city. It's a peaceful city, but that peace wouldn't last forever. One day, out of nowhere, the changelings attack. The Pegasus ponies are completely caught off guard. Surprise attack seems to be pushing the battle in favour of the changelings. King Orion, however, wasn't about to let his people fall. Leading his people, they begin to actually gain an advantage over the changelings. The Pegasus actually managed to put up a very good fight. Despite lacking their own magic like the changelings, Chrysalis has to think quickly. And she does. She spots what presumably seems to be the king's second in command. She smashes into him. She knocks him out completely before taking his form. Now disguised as the second in command, she flies back up to where the king is and orders a retreat. The king and the remaining Pegasus foolishly follow. The king takes a few more Pegasus that he can find and dives back into the castle. Chrysalis lands inside with the king and the few remaining Pegasus, and she quickly locks them inside. The king questions, why exactly did we pull back? We were winning. We had the changelings on the run. Chrysalis quickly reveals herself and immediately attacks. The king is able to dodge the initial attack, but the same can't be said for the other Pegasus. They fall to the floor, exhausted and a husk. The king, filled with rage and now determination to finally end this, quickly grabs a spear off the wall and charges her down. But as we know, changelings gain power by feeding, and Chrysalis has been feeding on a lot of love. The king, unfortunately for him, is too slow. Chrysalis turns around and quickly hypnotizes him. After eating his love, she drops the husk of his body onto the floor. His crown clatters to the ground. Chrysalis picks up his crown, and using her twisted dark magic, she transforms it into the crown that we see her wearing in the comics and in the show. She takes the title of Queen. Orion, however, still able to move, ends up escaping. He flies away. As he flies away, we get to see what's left of Timbuktu, and as you can expect, it's not very good. Seemingly, the town is actually on fire. Must be a staple of a changeling invasion to just burn things down. I guess they're arsonists, maybe. We also get to see that sickly green goo again covering a few buildings. There's really no excusing her evil. She destroyed an entire city. After discussing the fall of Timbuktu, Fluttershy ends up bringing up the siege of Trot, ruled by an emperor, and I'm going to end up butchering his name because I'm really bad at pronouncing Latin names, so bear with me. The panel starts off with Queen Chrysalis looking into her helmet. Already kicked out and irked by her defeat recently, Chrysalis has decided to launch another, second invasion of the city of Trot, this time with a Trojan horse. A true classic. Using the city's emperor, and here I go to mispronounce his name no doubt, Inactitus. This name I cannot pronounce. I'm going to call him Emperor Chin because, golly, that's a chin. Anyways, using a giant emperor, Chin, her and her changelings hide away inside it. Her changelings naturally question if this would actually work. Chrysalis assures them that this isn't about fooling the normal ponies of the city or the soldiers. This is simply a way to fool Emperor Chin, because she believes, no, she knows Emperor Chin would most certainly fall for it. Which, yeah, he does. Yeah, he absolutely falls for it. His guards warn him that this is very clearly a setup, and they shouldn't let this very obvious trap into their city. Being a fool that he is, and so in love with himself, he decides against it. Now, thankfully, his guards are actually pretty smart, but they're not dumb at all. One guard, presumably the second in command, orders in secret that a letter is immediately sent to Celestia. The magical barrier around Trot is lowered, and the Trojan horse is let in. As soon as the Trojan horse is let in, the massacre begins. The changelings, led by their queen, burst out in swarms and start attacking the nearest ponies that they can find. Almost instantly, like the last city and the last town that we saw, the changelings begin to burn down the city, covering it once again in that same familiar sick, vile green goo. It seems like all was lost for Trot. The Emperor is sucked dry, Chrysalis is now even more powerful than she ever has been, but as all seems lost, Celestia herself shows up to defend it. In a rage of fury, Celestia turns herself into soaring fire. While she isn't able to save the Emperor or any of the other victims, she was able to catch Chrysalis off guard. Celestia ends up using a spell that literally burns alive Queen Chrysalis and her changelings. In fact, this is actually the canon lore reason as to why changelings have holes all over their body. The Battle of Trot comes to an end with an ultimate pony victory. As punishment for her crimes against pony kind, Celestia decides not to turn Chrysalis and the changelings into stone, but instead she decides to banish them into an active volcano. A dragon ends up coming by. He opens the volcano up and threatens to eat the changelings. However, the queen manages to manipulate the dragon. After using one of her changelings as a living spear, she pierces its wing and causes the dragon to fall into the lava below. The changelings escape, and the rest is history. The comic ends with Twilight getting tricked into freeing Chrysalis. And I think it's at this point where Twilight probably realised that there was no hope to ever reform Queen Chrysalis. The changelings end up escaping, and the rest again is history. However, before she escapes, she actually tells Twilight how her people came to be. A little squirrel picks up some acorns. However, one acorn that he picks up is rotten and disgusting. He throws the acorn away. The acorn falls down into a vile pit underneath the many graves. Pony bones scatter the ground, nearby a sticky green bubbling pool. This magical pool begins to change the acorn as it falls in. The acorn immediately starts to sprout into a growing plant. Days, weeks and months pass as the plant slowly transforms into a big magical tree. During its transformation, the plant actually starts eating flies. The tree even begins to drag in some of the bones that have fallen from the graves above. Unicorn skulls, bones, anything. And that's when we see a familiar face. Starswell the Bearded strolls in. He decides, for whatever reason, to set up camp here in this dark and very evil looking cave. However, as he's setting up his little camp, a random fly flies over to him and bites him. That's when he noticed the odd tree. The vines dragging bones into the murky green water below. With his wisdom, his power and his skills, Starswell quickly clues on that this was magic. Dark and evil magic. And so acting quickly to stop any pony from ever getting hurt, he puts up a sign. Yeah, no, I am not joking, a bloody sign. World's best wizard, by the way. Unknowingly cracking the wood of the tree, he accidentally sets free the changelings that were hiding inside. Now free and alive, the changelings move out and, well, the rest is history. And with that being said, well, that's it for today's video. That right there is the origins of Queen Chrysalis and her changeling army. I hope you guys enjoyed this lore video, and I hope you learned something new about Queen Chrysalis and her background origins. Anyway, that's going to do it for today's video. Until next time, every pony, this has been Off The Hoof, signing off.